Hi there. In this video, we're going to go over something called an array list, which is like using an array, but it's going to be a lot more powerful. It's going to let us do a lot more things. What you'll see right now on the screen is I have my little fish tank program running. Got a fish running around. And every time I press the mouse, I get some fish food that comes in. And you'll notice something cool is happening. When the fish interacts with the fish food, it eats the food. Okay, that's a nice feature of fish, is they eat their food. And using ArrayList will let us incorporate this into your fish tank projects a lot easier. Now to do this, we need to go over the way the syntax works for ArrayList. It's a little bit different from arrays. Okay, so you'll see here up at the top, I've got it just says ArrayList food flakes equals new ArrayList food. Okay, so first you say ArrayList because that's what you're making, and then this is the type of the data type you're going to put inside your array list, right? And I'm going to put my, so I have a food class over here. It's pretty simple, but I'm going to put food objects inside this array list. And I'm going to call my array list flakes because it's fish flakes. And then I just have to do this other syntax over here. It says equals new array list food. And then notice the open close parentheses on the right. Okay. Now, to use an array list, we actually are going to use a really cool and funky notation. Instead of using a for loop to iterate through all the items in an array like we did before, we're going to use a for loop to iterate through all the items in an array list in this really funky notation right here. Right? So this will all work. This part will all work very similar to arrays, except that I have a new notation. All right, so I'm doing for, and then inside this parentheses right here, I'll go through what this means. All right, for every object of type food, and right here you get to call it whatever you want. I'm calling mine pho. Right? So for every item that's food, let's call it pho, inside the array list, which is called flakes. Right? So my array list is called, I'll go back up so you can see it. It's called flakes. Right? The item types inside the data type is food. And I'm just making up this name right here. I'm calling it pho. I could also just call it a flake, right? Inside of flakes. But then I have to come down here and I have to change all these things because it'll use dot notation, a flake. And then again, I have to go through and change all these everywhere it says FO, FO inside of my code. All right, so instead of doing that, I'm gonna go back and change it to FO to make it so it still runs. So FO is one flake of food. And I get to call it whatever I want there. And notice this is a colon. It's not a semicolon. All right, and this is just a handy notation. All right, so what this does, it says for every food data type or food object, let's call the current one pho, whatever. Please to the current one, use the move method. Then for the current one, use the display method. Right, and then here I have some logic here that I need to use in order to remove something from an array list. Right, and I'm going to get into that in just a second. So let's not think about removing stuff just yet, because that's going to be a little bit more complicated. Right, but what I would like for you to do first is I'd like for you to just make a class. How about something like a really simple ball class, new tab. I'm gonna call mine you know what? Let's just call it food. And I'm just going to make it fall down, right? Just like a piece of fish food or raindrop. And for that, I'm going to say, here's my brand spanking new food class, right? So it's going to be all this stuff. You've already seen this before. And now I'll walk you through just the steps of creating an array list and adding things to it. But I don't, like I said, I don't want to get into removing things from an array list on day one. All right. But I will give you some code to kind of play with if you want to. All right, so the first thing I'll do is I'll type array list. It's going to be item type food. Oops. And I'm going to call mine shaker for the fish food shaker equals new. All right, so now I have created it in an array list. There is no food in this list. Okay, so I'll do a setup. And that's all I need for that. Now the draw. Close that off before I forget. All right, and what I'll do is I'll say, I'm going to put in that logic that just says, if the mouse is pressed, then add some food. So I'll say if mouse pressed. And remember this right here, this is the same as saying if mouse pressed is true. Okay, this will evaluate to true if the mouse is pressed. So if that's true, shaker dot add, and this is a new notation that's cool. I'm going to add a new food item, right? And that's cool, but remember that we haven't actually done anything with this food item until we start calling these methods on our food. All right, so, well, what we're going to do is we're going to use this new fancy notation for every food item. For the current one, which I'm going to call this. No, I can't use the word this. How about one flake? So I know that I'm just talking about one. And my container, my array list is called shaker. Okay. And now for every one flake, right, for every one flake of type food inside shaker, I'm going to execute the move method. So I'll use the dot move, but I have to do that on one flake. And I'll do the same thing for display. And then I'll close off that for loop. Okay, so now hopefully it should run. Cool. And now I'll press the mouse ladder so you can so you can hear me doing it. Okay, so the logic of this. All right. First we create an empty array list, which will much more easily let us add and remove things than a regular array. This is actually going to be way more fun for us. And then I say if mouse pressed evaluates to true, add a new food object to my shaker array list. Okay, so if mouse press is true. And notice that that happens, every time it checks. So that's 60 times a second. It's looking to see if this is true. And if it is, it adds a new food item. And then in this loop right here, it says for a particular flake of type food inside shaker. Execute these two methods. All right, and look how much we get to do here and how little code. And that's really nice. Okay, so here's what I'd like for you to do. I would like for you to implement this into your fish tank program in some way or another. And also, fish food's really colorful, right? I mean, you should think about what kind of fish flakes you want to feed your fish. And also, it's not always round. It's not always round. Sometimes it has kind of a weird angular shape that you might want to take into consideration. They might even have some randomness in the size, and that could be really cool. All right, so that's your assignment. Incorporate this ArrayList technique into your fish tank program. It's going to open up a whole new worlds of possibilities and make your food a little bit prettier than mine. That's kind of boring, although I do like watching it fall at random speeds. Okay, good luck, and I'll see you soon.